rock isn't dead. It's in flux.
Hi everyone, I'm Britt with Rock and Flux, and I am joined today by Mark Dwyer of Buzz Kull. Mark, thank you for being with me here today.
No problem, Britt. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So let's just start out. I always start out asking, how did Buzz Kull kind of come to be? What was the background and how you got started creating music under it?
It's all very fresh in my mind at the moment, actually, because I just started taking little small snippets of diary entries of probably the last, since day dot. So I kind of started from the very beginning. So everything's well and truly refreshed. But I was in Sydney living in Sydney at the time, and I still do. But I was just going through a bit of a rough patch. I hadn't really recorded or made music by myself before.
Mm-hmm.
So I stayed home one Christmas kind of break, summer. For us, it's summertime.
Yeah,
But
that always is such a strange thing to me that you all have Christmas in the summer in Australia.
yeah, it's a bizarre world. But I like, whilst everyone else is kind of like out doing, a lot of outdoor summertime things like the beach and stuff.
Yeah.
I kind of I was in a bit of a headspace where I kind of preferred to stay in a lot, which is kind of like a still like an ongoing thing. I have a bit of an indoor issue, but yeah, so I did that and decided to record and try and record for the first time by myself, just to kind of feel like, see if I could accomplish something just on my own. And I wrote like experimented with like a bunch of like just really basic synthesizers, drum machines and stuff, and wrote I think it was just the one song I kind of started off with. And at the time, financially, I wasn't that well off, so all of my stuff was a bit shoddy. My computer was average, and so I put the song that I made on SoundCloud, thinking that it was more of a storage, a website used for musicians for more so storage based, and didn't realize it ran off an algorithm, like kind of process.
Yeah.
And then a couple of days later, I put the song underneath a fake name and a fake project name, which was still Buzz Kull. Like it was just a name that I made up on the spot.
Yeah.
And people had heard it from the algorithm, and a lot of people were like writing to the SoundCloud account, and the email that I had it under, and my inbox was just full of people wanting to know when there was more of that coming out. So it kind of gave me the confidence to like pursue the project as an actual thing. And so that's pretty much how it became a thing.
Cool. And when I noticed, like looking at your discography, you kind of started out just releasing singles for a while at first before you actually released a full album. Was that just kind of like because you were working through it and just coming up with things over time?
Yeah, I honestly had no idea what I was doing. I was like just taking it every day as it came, because it kind of like came along, and I didn't know anything about like labels or anything. Everything was just so new to me that I was very amateur, and I felt like the only kind of way to kind of build the name and the project at the time, in the only way that I knew, was just continuously put out singles until I guess the other thing as well is I was still probably trying to find a particular sound that I was trying to fall into, I think. And like even then I was still like doing covers, like a lot of covers of other artists. So I was still it was more of a practice. Like I was still learning how to record and how to present the work. So it was all kind of like a touch and go thing that I was just kind of learning on the spot.
Okay. And you released, so your first album, what you released in 2017.
Yeah.
And it was called Chrome, right? That was your first?
Chroma, yeah.
Chroma. And what it's actually one of I think your most popular songs on Spotify was from that album, Into the Void. Um,
Yeah,
it's almost in that song like the synth is the hook. Do you, when you're writing, is that like purposeful when like that the music kind of like pieces of the music tend to be like the feature of the song, or did it just kind of happen to be that way?
it's something that I found that I didn't know that I had an ear for, or that I was even good at or capable
Hmm.
of doing. But it was just something that I just realized. I was like, oh, like I just kind of continuously kept finding these like hooks where I would sit there, and because I don't know how to read music or write
Okay.
music, anything like in an in-depth way of
Hmm.
music related in regards to actually lessons and the skill set of it. But yeah, I just go off by tone and sound
Yeah.
and listening to it. But yeah, I'll just sit there and play around with hooks to see what would work, and wouldn't really go with any rule books as to what key things are in. I'd just do it by sound. But yeah, for some reason, I just found a knack for being able to play a way that I'd play. And
Mm.
yeah, some of those hooks just like fell into place really nicely. And people today are still like, oh, how do you manage to get these like real like earwormy hooks
Yeah.
within these songs? And I
Right.
have no idea. I still don't even know what I'm doing. But yeah, I'll just sit there and play around with it, and like not even to the point where I'll try and I'll spend X amount of time on trying to find a sound. Like if there's a sound that somewhat works, I'll try and find the hook in that and
Hmm.
and get it down. And then like if I feel like I need to alter the sound, I'll keep that part that I've played and recorded, and then just manipulate it or adjust it or change the entire synthesizer if
Okay.
need be. But yeah, I've I don't know what I. It's just like a strange thing that I've just been capable of being able to pull off, like an
Good skill.
imposter syndrome effect.
Um, and so is it only like synth that you're using to create all of the sounds that you have? And then also like when you're playing live, like how does that work in your live show? Is it just you, or do you have like anybody else that plays with you? How does that work?
With the live setup, it's just me. Like when I first started it, I didn't have the confidence or even the skill set to be able to think I'd be able to pull it off as a live performance based thing by myself. It was very like don't even think I could even imagine playing live by myself back then. So I had my other friend Rebecca playing with me, but she moved to Melbourne and joined another band, and yeah, kind of just time took its toll, and
Mhm.
we and then it was just me. So I had to figure out how to do it by myself, which meant stripping back some of the live elements. But I feel like I found a happy medium in regards to trying to fill out a stage and portray like a live show with just the one person, but also because it like also consists of so much traveling and like potential damage of stuff, or just even just having like those safety boundaries of gear playing up. I feel like I've got it at a good place now where everything's pretty fail safe, but also being able to fulfill like a good live performance role without it being, too stripped back or too karaoke based. Like I'll play synthesizer live and sing and try and do as much stuff as possible. And it makes it a bit more, fun and challenging for myself as well to be able to be doing as many things on stage as well. But
Well, and I
with the
mean,
recording, oh
well,
sorry,
it's okay. So I mean, but like being alone on stage, how do you is that like does that ever feel weird for you, or like how do you fill that space, and like how do you deal with literally all the eyes being on you because there's no like ensemble?
yeah, not anymore. I think it feels more strange now if it's like me by myself to something to like of a more empty room, like a lesser, smaller, more intimate crowd. But the bigger the stage and the bigger the audience, it seems as though like I kind of just fall into a place of comfort a bit more easier now. But yeah, I don't even know how I got through the early process of it. I know I was extremely nervous and didn't know what to do with myself with even like the small stages. But now it's like I kind of just switch off and go into like an autopilot mode, and then even with having an audience, you have this weird like sixth sense that you can kind of see the crowd, but it's almost like looking through it. So it's like you're aware, but you kind of have an ability to ignore. But the biggest thing for me is trying not to make eye contact, because it's something that throws me off. And yeah, but not entirely, but yeah, it's now a thing where I will just kind of, it'll look like I'm looking at you, but I'm kind of looking through in a non-rude way.
Like almost like above people.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're like the hairline.
Yeah. What's the audience reaction to you live? What's that been like? And then also, especially just being by yourself, how do you recreate some of like the recorded, version of the song? Like, do you have any difficulty? Do you have to rework anything for that, or does it pretty much work itself out?
With that, it's not too bad. Like I feel like I've put enough elements into the live recording to really find at least one part to play throughout most of the songs that I've recorded. I think there's maybe only one song from the recent record which is a bit more difficult because it's quite rhythmically like percussive. It's mainly almost like percussive, plus even the synthesizer elements are quite percussive as well. So it's come to the point where if I do play that, I will just do like a vocal over the top of it. But it's one of those songs that has the right energy to kind of pull off like something that doesn't sound too, like the recorded version. Like I'll still put a bit more energy into it to make it sound more abrasive and give it a bit more energy.
Okay. That makes sense. So if someone maybe saw you live for the first time and wanted to tell people about you, or had never heard or listened to Buzz Kull, what song do you think you would suggest to them to start out with?
I would say maybe Rise from Your Grave is a good one. I kind of put that on the record to open the record as like as an introduction. Sorry, I was just getting a phone call coming through. Yeah, Rise from Your Grave I put on as like an introduction to the new record. Like usually in the past I've opened up the last two albums with an instrumental track, but it was the first time I put just a normal track opening up a full record. So I think that was like a good, like, I'm kind of back doing this thing again kind of song. So it was a good first track introduction.
Okay. Let's play a clip of it. What about that song do you think makes it maybe more defining, musically speaking, of your sound? Like, do you think it represents your overall sound well?
The last record, like the recent record that I did, I had no expectations of how that was going to go because I feel like I adjusted a very strong alteration from the last two records to what the new record is. And that was the first song that I kind of like wrote and had established for the record. And it made me a bit nervous, but also because of everything that was happening in the world, I was quite detached as well. So I was almost treating the entire record like the swan song of the project. I wasn't really invested in whether it was going to do well or bad. I was just like, this is possibly going to be the last album. I don't know if I'm going to play live again. And so I just kind of put it out in the world, and I didn't know how it was going to be received. But yeah, it was received way, way better than I ever thought, which was kind of mind blowing for me, because for some reason in my mind, I was like, this is probably going to get absolutely shut down. But yeah, it was received really well, and I'm so appreciative and grateful that I was able to, take a slight, not a slight, but like a decent amount of distance away from what those first two records were like, and still have it like received in a very positive light.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, because you don't want to be stuck in a box necessarily. You want to be able to branch out. Are you? Fascination was your most recent record, right? So that's the one that you released in 2022. Did you record a lot of that during like lockdowns and COVID?
I struggled a lot with trying to like get recording done in lockdown. I think there was maybe 3 songs that I'd done throughout a very extended period from just before lockdown. Like I'd released Last in the Club in 2019, just before the lockdown occurred, and wasn't sure what I was going to do with it, and didn't really know if I was going to do an album or anything at that time. And then throughout that period in lockdown, I think I only got finalized 2 songs roughly throughout the entire lockdown. And then with the lockdown here, it was extended another 6 months. So things went back to normal. I moved back to, like, I was living off the grid, like in a small beach town throughout the most of it. So I was quite isolated. And when I moved back to Sydney to kind of re-enter a normal existence again of working a normal job, I came back, worked a job, and we went back into another lockdown because it hit really hard here again. And so that was like the time where I was like, okay, I've worked, maybe I'll make this, like, didn't know that it was going to be so long, but I was like, if I've forced to stay inside, I may as well make the most of the time with it. And somehow managed to like do the whole record in like a week, maybe a week and a half. But yeah, it was a very quick turnaround. But once I kind of got going, I think I finished 1 song with the first day I had off in the lockdown. And once that momentum started, I was like, okay, this is like one of those moments that is really hard to find, and maybe I can conquer a lot more than just this one track. And I sat inside, had coffee ready to go, and just blitzed out the whole album.
Well, and again, like, some of the songs with that, like the instrumentation is the hook, like Burn It to the Ground. For me, it's like the synth and like the different set, like it's not necessarily like a lot of your music, it's not necessarily like the lyrics that become the hook, it's the music. And I find that interesting because I personally don't feel like many bands pull that off. One that always comes to mind for me is like INXS. Like they were really great about making musical parts of their songs a hook. And they were also Australian, so that's maybe it's an Australian thing.
It's one thing that I do like to pick out as well. And if there's like a strong, and for your reference with INXS, like their production and their drums was always really good, and sometimes even like threw in like a drum solo that sounds really lame, but for some reason theirs were like super good because it had that like new wave kind of sheen to it. It was like really processed and sounded real like snappy. And they made something kind of like rock and roll lame cool and fun. But that's something I think that may be one of the reasons as well as to why I have that like weird potential ability to kind of like create my own weird little hooks, because it's something I do hone in on. When I hear just one thing of the song, I'm like, that's cool. And I won't even have to like anything else about the song, but that is something that'll make me take me back to it and probably listen to it over and over times, and also try and recreate my own version of it, or just keep it in like my headspace to kind of keep it in mind for a concept within a production in the future as well.
And I could be completely off base with what you think, but the title track to me almost sounds like a darker version of a song by the band Yaz, or also known as Yazoo, like that 80s band. And I
also
wondered,
a great hook project.
Oh yeah. So I was
their hooks
wondering,
were
like,
fantastic.
could you hear what I mean by that when I say that?
Yeah, because their concept is like, although they had a couple of songs that like used the similar synthesizer with a simpler, like a similar, like arpeggio, and it was like hard to divide some of the songs away from each other because even the vocal delivery and everything was so aligned and so similar. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And sometimes it's, I wish it's something that I didn't get so stuck into, because there's like times where I'm like, oh, this sounds too repetitive. How am I going to change or break this up? And I'll spend like a couple of hours trying to figure out how to like not make it so bland and so repetitive and just like a straight down the line thing. But sometimes it gets to the point where it's like, no, like that's it. This is how that song was made. There's no, if you try and change that, that's going to change the whole track. And although you can do as many things as like, create a different verse, a different way you deliver the verse, you have to kind of rely on that one thing to kind of change it out. But yeah, I do get stuck in those repetitive up sections, which sometimes this is hard to break away from, but I feel like maybe it's another potential signature thing that's just aligned with the project. But there's been some people that have like kind of like said stuff to me about it, but it's like water off my back, so it's fine.
I mean, I don't think it's a negative thing, personally. And then MRM did a remix of Fascination. How did that come about that they did that?
He's a friend of mine, and we have known each other for a while and been talking for a very long time. We got to play a show together late last year in Switzerland.
Cool.
And he's a great producer. Like, Jack's a really lovely guy and super talented. And he's also on the same label as me, Avant, the Italian record label. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I wasn't really planning on anyone really doing any remixes on the album, but Jack reached out, and I love Jack's work, and he's like, oh, I'd love to do a remix on one of the tracks for you if you'd like. And I did one for Jack like a couple of years ago when he released one of his albums. Like, I think that was maybe in lockdown actually.
Okay.
And he just reached out and wanted to do it for something, and he did such a good job. Like, that remix is fantastic, and it blew my mind. Like, his like production skill and ability is fantastic.
Yeah, I like it. It's always interesting to me because I do notice a lot of bands and artists within this whole kind of, like, I don't want to say genre because I feel like there's so many subsets within it, but it's almost this like community that kind of works together. So it is always interesting for me when you all like remix one of, the other band's songs, and like how it can become such a different song just by somebody else like reimagining it. And seeing it through the other person's eyes. I think it's really cool as a listener. And I'm glad for the people, I fully support remixes.
Yeah. Even
would there
for the
be
people
anyone else
it.
that you would ever like either want to remix one of their songs or have them remix one of yours?
Yeah, like there's some great producers out there who I think do incredible work with remixes. Like, it's almost like too long of a list, but like Contravoid always makes great mixes, and I love Cam, and he's so talented. Same with Gus from Boy Harsher, does does really, really great work, and all the remixes that I've ever heard Gus do have been so good. But then there's like a lot of like the crew that are more involved, more in the techno realm, which
Mhm.
do some cool stuff, like Pablo Bossi, Face Fatale, even Ellen Alien. Like, just even before I met her, she was just like taking tracks from online and doing these like remixes throughout lockdown of like some of my tracks, and
Cool.
they're really cool. And for such a large name in the techno scene, like, it, yeah, she was just like doing these really cool mixes of some of my songs, and getting me a new audience, which was really,
Yeah.
really sweet.
Yeah. I mean, and that's probably another cool thing about doing remixes too, because it does, if you are like a slightly different, if you have a different group of fans, it kind of opens up to other people, which is a good thing also. Um, so you've done some music videos too. How do you come up with the concepts of your music videos, and how do you decide which songs you think you would want to do a video for?
Uh-oh. Is that frozen?
Uh-oh. Can you hear me? Sometimes we have to turn the video off if it gets too frozen. Can you hear me?
You there, Brett?
Yeah. Can you hear
Yeah.
me? Okay.
Sorry, I
It's
wasn't
okay.
sure if that was mine. I was like, oh, maybe I'll plug my computer in, but oh, we're back.
Okay.
Yeah. So after
Uh-oh, now you're
the
frozen for
Ellen
me.
Alien. Oh, really?
We may have to try turning off our video, because sometimes, I don't know why, but like when we have the video on, it makes it freeze. We can try
Okay.
that. Let's try. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. That might help.
Okay. Cool.
So yeah, what I was asking was, I know you have some music videos for some of your songs. Like, how do you come up with the concept for them? And then also, how do you come up with what song you want to do a music video for? Like, for example, you had mentioned Rise from Your Grave earlier. That's one you have a video for. So, like, is it just based on the song in particular that you choose, or how does that kind of get decided?
I think I've always just kind of gone off by what songs will be the singles.
Mm-hmm.
So there'll be the strongest song. There'll be uh, yeah. I usually take three, and
Okay.
it's usually something that in the past I've discussed with uh, Andrea from the label from Avant, and
Mm-hmm.
he's always got a really good ear and idea and kind of like how to deliver the album. And I feel like with him, there was quite a lot of things with this album where he's like, he even piped up about a lot of stuff that he was happy with and what he wasn't happy with and what he would change and what he thinks we should change. And I think a lot of those elements really assisted with me. So with that, we kind of just met in the middle. Like, okay, what should we do as a single? What should we do? Which ones do we want to do a video for? And like, I think with this day and age, as well as now that the world relies so heavily on video content with like all the TikTok related, like social media, even everything translating now into like Instagram with video content, that making music videos for your work is quite a strong element to kind of give something else to complement it whilst throughout that releasing period and reintroduction period into new work. So, and it gives people another idea of like, even down to the point of like what kind of cinematic or film related aesthetics or concepts that you're interested in or you're trying to like recreate or deliver with the thing, the elements of what you feel like your music relates to in a cinematic format.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And yeah, I mean, anymore, it definitely goes hand in hand, and I feel like people are always looking on YouTube for, because like sometimes people listen to music on YouTube and then they figure, okay, well, if it has a video with it, even better, you know?
Yeah, yeah, it's like the instant gratification that it's a stronger track or it's something that's easy to pick up. Like, oh, this one's got a video attached to it. This must be a highlighted track or a reason why this has got a video attached to it, and
Right.
kind of be more attention drawn towards it, or even just curious as to who the said person is making this music looks like. But
Right.
yeah,
Right.
I'm not super comfortable in front of camera. I'm still trying to get past even just normal photographs. Like photographs and being on camera for me is like still trying to get past it as much as I did with performing live by
Right.
myself.
It's weird. It's weird to put yourself out there in that way.
Yeah.
You know. How did you start working with Avant as a label, and like what is the music scene in general like in Australia? Is there a strong music scene and venues to play? Because I know you, and I also know you were traveling to Japan not long ago. Was that just like a personal trip, or were you playing out there?
Japan was a personal trip. It's
Okay.
I kind of I booked it as just kind of like a holiday for myself and my partner, and
Mhm.
then I wasn't expecting to do any more touring this year because I did a big tour to Europe last year, and I
Mhm.
was also waiting for my US visa to clear. So I was like, I'm not doing anything until this visa clears because it was
Right.
so much of a weight on my shoulders trying to get that all sorted.
I believe it.
And then I did an interview with a Japanese magazine like a couple of months before I left, and they asked if I was doing a show because I mentioned I was like, I'm actually going to be out there like soon.
Mhm.
And then like 2 weeks before I flew, they're like, oh, do you want to come to a show in Tokyo? And I was like, sure, I'd love to. So I just put my stuff in my suitcase, and yeah, the show in Tokyo was really fun. I've played there once before, actually, like just before lockdown, and that was a cool show. It was more of a bigger kind of fashion event, like art fashion kind of event. That was like a
Oh,
really
cool.
big show, but this was my first headline show there, and it was cool, like cute little like cozy venue, and
Nice.
everyone there is very 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 sweet, and yeah, it's cool. I feel like the scene in Japan is still growing, and I feel like the more myself and all those other artists that exist in that same kind of scene go there,
Yeah.
it'll get bigger and better and stronger. So it was cool to
Right.
see somewhere that has the potential to grow and be a great thing. But the scene in Australia is a bit of a hard one because even post lockdown, a lot of venues closed down. They don't really put a lot of money into the arts here, so everyone really has to push to try and make the events something worth attending. It's a strange one, but there's definitely a scene here, like especially in Melbourne. Like I'm in Melbourne at the moment. Actually, I'm playing a show here tonight,
Cool.
and like even like I guess the best example is when Boy Hush were here and we toured together, and Melbourne was great. We did New Zealand, which was fun, and Brisbane and Sydney. But I think again, it's something that still has the potential of growing here. But the international, like a lot of the international bands in the scene, are still just starting to come here because we have like Cold Cave coming in
Oh, cool.
November, and Lebanon Hanover coming in April next year. So
Nice.
it's getting a bit better. Like things are growing, things are getting better, and hopefully there's a light at the end of the tunnel with that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if people are starting to go, that can only help, right? So, I mean, that's a good thing.
Exactly.
It is
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
interesting to like see regionally how different audiences act differently, and even like in the States, and when you play here, you'll see it like across the country, like, coast to coast. It's so different, it's very interesting to see it, and just depending on where you are, people. I mean, I think the interesting also thing though about music is that it brings so many different people together, of all different walks of life and different backgrounds, which I think is kind of a really neat thing about it because it is so unitive of people. But it is always interesting to me to see how like different areas and different crowds react. And it's also like, it's not even necessarily like, because it's just like certain audiences feel that like being respectful is like standing and listening. Others are like, oh, I need to move around. So it's really interesting to always see that.
Change. Yeah, it does change very dramatically depending on where you are geographically as well. Japan was very motionless, and I was expecting that because I did hear and have seen like an audience in Tokyo and Japan before where it's a very somber, motionless kind of crowd. Mm-hmm. But towards the end, everyone was dancing and throwing down, so that was cool to see a transition throughout the set from like I guess like a couple of songs in. That's all it kind of took. But a lot of people say the same thing about like a German audience as well. Mm-hmm. People have said to be the same, but German audience is definitely getting much better. And I guess the other thing that I have noticed as well is like with the more like international cities where it's a lot more multicultural, where there's like usually more people from other countries throughout the said city. Like Berlin's a good example. Sydney is probably similar as well, and probably the same with LA and New York. It seems to be like a one set format where everyone's there for usually the one thing, and everyone kind of knows what the protocol is, and everyone's just there to move, dance, and have a good time. And it doesn't really have that same kind of signature set to what other cities and what other countries are known for.
Right. Yeah, it is really interesting. And I agree with you. Like, I think the more mixed of a city it is, the more you're going to get a difference.
Yeah. It's just one big blend of everyone. And even the people who are standing still, you won't even notice because it's such a...
Exactly.
Everyone, it's just a different mixed concoction of people who have a different insight or a different expectation of what they want to experience and enjoy from a night.
Right. So something I always ask everybody, and it's always interesting because I get such varying answers, but so the whole purpose of this show is like saying that rock isn't dead. And I don't even necessarily mean like rock and roll as a genre necessarily. I think it's more of a ubiquitous term, but kind of like all the subgenres that, you know, aren't necessarily mainstream. And my opinion is that it's not dead. It's just always changing and in flux. So I would be curious to see and hear what your thoughts on that are, if you think that phrase has any validity.
Yeah, for sure. Like at the end of the day, everything has branched out from something. Rock was branched out from some, like I guess the blues and R&B and soul. And then even the genres that a lot of other people, even electronic music, exist on now is the same deal. Like they would have branched out from rock culture at some point when rock went from that transition of introducing like synthesizers and drum machines. So yeah, it's just a forever going thing where I'm sure years down the track, something else will be branching out from this. So it's just going to be a never ending genre blend of different concepts and different ideas and different sounds and different ways of creating music that will be forever going, but you can step back many steps and still find your way back to, you know, all the original ways and formats and styles and genres. But yeah, it's just a forever growing thing that I don't see slowing down at any point.
No, I don't either. And I think it's actually growing and gaining more popularity now with like, because there's such an influx now of like 80s and 90s culture coming back that, you know, I think it's only helping, you know.
It's a time thing. Like I feel like there's lulls, periods where there's lulls where people can be devoted to something else for a bit, but then if there's artists and bands still releasing music that come out at the right time when the world needs something of that kind of caliber of sound and style, it just falls into place perfectly. It's like the one perfect example that always comes to mind for me is like Multidoma, are like that classic 80s post-punk sound that
Mm-hmm.
people, a lot of people say it's been done before, but it had not been done the right way in such a long time. And
Mm-hmm.
when they dropped that first album, I feel like it was at the right time where the world needed it, because it was such a strong period of like industrial bands and industrial electronic music, and even just general electronic post-punk music. But they brought that real raw, like stripped back production quality that no one had really heard, because everyone was trying to make their production and tracks sound very crispy and very tight and very club friendly. But they had that grainy, perfect post-punk production quality to it that not really anyone had really brought to the world in a while. So it fell into place at the right time, at the right place. And yeah, it ticked the box. And that will be a forever going thing as well, where things will come, they'll disappear, but then they'll come back stronger, and there'll be a whole new younger audience as well for it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, because kids now are finding, and maybe also because like more popular artists today are influenced by that music a little bit more, but I definitely think there's more of an interest in those types of, even like the older music itself,
Yeah,
and the style and everything else that comes with it. So it's been really
yeah.
interesting to see.
Yeah, well, I think the other thing as well is like the way younger generations hear music or see music
Hmm.
is a lot of them that are using like apps like
Yep.
TikTok, try and find a hook that
Yeah.
would work with a video,
Right.
like kind of crossover. And all it takes now is just one, like an intro or a hook
Yeah.
that works well with that. And then if it hits right, or it's someone's made a content video with the right kind of structure and aesthetic to match the music, it all it takes is one person to do that and one hook. And it's kind of crazy to see how much like popular music is blowing up in that
Yeah.
format now.
It's true. It's true. Well, I mean, like, because nowadays, especially with like any of the popular artists, they all like have to have hits on TikTok. Like, that's like where they want to break stuff. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's like the expected kind of concept now with being a popular artist, or even just gaining fans
Yeah.
is through that. But
Yeah.
like I guess the strange thing that I have noticed is that with a lot of those younger fans that are finding those bands through those like formats of apps, is they're bringing back things like cardboard cutout signs to shows. Like I played with Multidoma in Brisbane, and
Mhm.
I've been to a lot of shows in Australia, but never seen kids with like cardboard cutout signs and stuff. And
Oh,
at
wow.
the Multidoma show, there was like kids with like cardboard signs. It's like, oh, that's something that, like, I obviously you see it in like a lot of things that exist in popular culture, like films
Mhm.
and even documentaries and even things from the past. But seeing young kids coming to shows with like cardboard cutouts with like their own little written signs and messages on them was
Yeah.
something I'd never seen before. So it's bringing back things that I didn't know was possible.
I'm kind of happy about it because it's like that's the culture that I grew up in, and
Yeah,
as an elder millennial, I'm happy to see some of that stuff coming back because there's a nostalgia to it, and there's I don't know, we have so many pieces of social media. That's one thing I think is great about still having live music is you get that real interaction and making an actual sign, taking the time and then taking it there and not being on your phone. um I think is a great thing. So
yeah. You can't hold up a cardboard sign and hold your phone at the
right,
same time. But
right.
yeah, no, it was cool to see. It was, and I think like it seems to be like a more committed fan base based around that
Yeah.
as well. Like people have got a stronger connection to the music and the people who are making the music, which means obviously more people attending shows, but
Yeah.
also they're probably doing a bit better in the way of like selling merch, whether it be at the shows or online. But yeah, it's music's coming back stronger in those underground scenes because of it, for sure.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Well, Mark, thank you for being here and talking with me today. I really it's been a great conversation. I've appreciated you taking the time and talking to me. Want to tell people who listening where they can find your music. So you're on all the streaming platforms. You have videos on YouTube. You are on Instagram at Buzz Kull, right?
Yeah.
Facebook on there.
Yeah, all the things. I think I've ticked all the boxes for for where I can exist. I'm definitely on there somewhere.
Okay, cool. And is that where they should go to find any kind of information on you, or like where you're playing, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, keep it all pretty updated on Facebook and Instagram and wherever I can. I'll like, because some people only use some one or the other, but I try and keep it all spread out equally.
Right.
Same kind of stuff. So yeah, it's always covered on all three or four or five.
Nice. Well, thank you again. Everyone check out Buzz Kull if you have not yet, and thanks for listening.
Thanks so much, Britt.